The sun was hanging low in the sky over Malibu, casting that golden kind of light that makes everything look like a movie scene. It was one of those quiet afternoons where the air feels warm, but the breeze coming off the ocean keeps it from being too hot. Most people were stuck in traffic on the highway or finishing up work inside tall, glass buildings, but the streets here were mostly empty. It was the kind of peace that is hard to find. Walking down the sidewalk was a man who didn't want to be found. He wasn't wearing a disguise, exactly, but he wasn't dressed to grab attention either. He wore a simple plaid shirt that looked like it had been washed 100 times, a pair of loose jeans, and scuffed boots. His hair was a little messy, pushed under a baseball cap. If you didn't know who he was, you might just think he was a guy who worked in a garage or maybe a construction worker taking a break. But if you looked closer, you would see the face of one of the most famous actors in the world. Keanu Reeves wasn't walking to a premiere or a movie set. There were no cameras flashing and no directors yelling action. He was just walking, letting his mind rest. For years, his life had been a blur of fast cars, explosions, and intense fight scenes on screen. But off-screen, he was a man who valued silence more than anything. He often said that he found happiness in the simple things, in just being able to walk down a street without anyone asking for a selfie or an autograph. As he walked, his hands were deep in his pockets. His head was down slightly, watching his boots hit the concrete. He was thinking about everything and nothing at the same time. He was thinking about the scripts he had read that week, the motorcycles he loved to ride, and maybe just thinking about where he might grab a bite to eat later. The world moved fast around him, but he moved at his own pace. Turning a corner, he spotted something ahead that made him slow his steps. It was a small setup on the edge of someone's driveway. It wasn't a fancy shop or a food truck. It was a folding table, the kind you use for yard sales, with a bright yellow tablecloth thrown over it. The tablecloth was a little wrinkled and looked like it had seen better days. On top of the table sat a large plastic pitcher filled with a yellow liquid and a stack of small paper cups. There was also a handwritten sign made from a piece of cardboard box and a thick black marker. The writing was a little shaky, big and bold, written in a child's handwriting. It simply read, "Lemonade to 50 cents. Behind the table sat a small chair, and on that chair sat a young girl. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old. She had her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and was wearing a t-shirt that was a size too big for her. She wasn't looking at her phone or playing a game. She was sitting with her elbows on her knees, her chin in her hands, watching the empty street with intense focus. Keanu stopped walking. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just watching her. It was such a pure sight. In a world where everyone was trying to sell something, trying to be something bigger than they were, this was just a child and a table. It reminded him of stories from his own childhood, of summers that felt like they would never end, where the biggest worry in the world was making enough money to buy candy or a new toy. He felt a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't the polite smile he gave to reporters or fans. It was a real smile. He checked his pockets, knowing he probably had some cash on him. He usually tried to keep a few dollars when he walked, just in case he ran into someone who needed help. The girl hadn't noticed him yet. She was busy adjusting the straw in the pitcher, making sure it was perfectly straight. She took her job very seriously. To her, this wasn't just a game. It was a business. She had a product, and she was ready to sell it. Keanu stepped off the curb and started walking toward the table. As he got closer, the sound of his boots on the pavement made the girl look up. Her eyes went wide for a second when she saw a stranger approaching, but she didn't look scared. She sat up straighter, smoothed her shirt, and put on her best business face. "Good afternoon," Keanu said softly. His voice was calm and gentle. "Hi," the girl replied back. She didn't scream. She didn't point. She didn't say, "Oh my goodness, you're that guy from the movies." She just treated him like a customer. That was exactly what he wanted. To her, he wasn't a superstar. He was just a thirsty guy walking down the street. He looked at the sign again and then at her. "I see you're selling lemonade," he said. "Yup," she said proudly. "I made it myself. It's fresh." Keanu nodded. That sounds perfect. It is a hot day out here. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He was ready to buy a cup, but he was also ready to do something nice. He knew that 50 cents wasn't a lot of money. He remembered being a kid and how exciting it was to make $5 in a whole afternoon. He wanted to make sure she felt like her hard work was worth it. The air between them was quiet and peaceful. There was no noise from the city, just the distant sound of waves crashing and a car passing by every few minutes. It felt like time had stopped just for this moment. The actor stood there looking at the little girl, feeling a strange sense of connection. Two different people, from two completely different worlds, standing in front of a lemonade stand. How much for a cup? He asked, even though he could clearly read the sign. 50 cents, she told him. He pulled out a $20 bill. It was crisp and new. He held it in his hand, looking at it and then back at the girl. He wasn't doing this to show off. He wasn't doing it because he was rich and famous. He was doing it because he was a human being who understood the value of encouragement. He wanted to see that look on her face when she realized she had made a big sale. "Okay," he said, stepping closer to the table. "I'll take one." The girl reached for a cup, her small hands moving carefully. She was trying so hard not to spill a drop. She poured the yellow liquid, the ice cubes clinking softly against the paper cup. It was a simple sound, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Keanu watched her, his patience endless. He was in no rush. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about his next line or his next move. He was just enjoying a lemonade. She handed him the cup. It was cold and sweating in the warm air. He took it and looked at the girl, preparing to hand her the $20. He expected her to be happy. He expected her to take the money and do a little happy dance. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. And as he extended his hand with the money, he had no idea that his simple act of kindness was about to turn into a moment that would stay with him forever. The girl looked at the bill, then up at his eyes, and suddenly the mood shifted completely. The paper cup felt cool in his hand, condensation already gathering on the outside and making his palm slightly damp. It was a small sensation, something so ordinary that most people would ignore it, but right now, it was grounding. It was real. Keanu brought the cup to his lips and took a sip. It wasn't fancy, gourmet lemonade. It was a bit too sweet with a slight tart aftertaste that comes from store-bought mix, but to him it tasted perfect. It tasted like summer afternoons a lifetime ago, a time when the biggest worry was whether the streetlights would turn on before you got home for dinner. He lowered the cup and smiled at the girl. It was a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "This is really good," he said, his voice low and raspy. "You did a great job." The girl beamed. It wasn't a polite customer service smile. It was a flash of pure pride. Her shoulders went back and she sat up a little taller on her chair. For a kid, validation from an adult, especially a stranger who stopped by, meant everything. In that moment, she wasn't just playing a game of shop. She was a business owner who had just received a 5-star review from her first customer of the day. "Thank you," she said, her voice bright. "My mom helped me with the ice." Keanu nodded slowly. "Well, tell your mom the ice is perfect." He glanced down at the table, where the handwritten sign flapped slightly in the breeze. "So 50 cents, right?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, sir." 50 cents a cup? Keanu reached into the pocket of his jeans. He didn't pull out a handful of change. He didn't even pull out a single dollar bill. Instead, he pulled out a crisp, green $20 bill. It was a lot of money for a cup of lemonade. It was enough to buy 40 cups. He held it out to her, the paper fluttering a little in the ocean air. To Keanu, this was a normal thing to do. He had been blessed with a successful career, and he never hesitated to share that good fortune when he could. He wasn't trying to buy her love or impress her. He just wanted to make her day. He knew that for a 9-year-old, $20 might as well be $1 million. It meant a new toy, or a trip to the candy store, or maybe just the feeling of having a wad of cash in her pocket. He expected her to gasp, maybe grab it quickly and shout with joy. "Here you go," he said, offering the bill. "Keep the change." The girl looked at the bill. Then she looked at Keanu, then she looked back at the bill. She didn't reach for it. She didn't gasp. In fact, her expression didn't change from that serious, focused look she had when she was pouring the drink. The silence stretched out between them. The distant sound of a lawnmower running somewhere down the street was the only noise. A car drove by on the main road, the sound fading as it sped away. Keanu waited, his hand still outstretched. He smiled a little wider, thinking maybe she was shy or didn't understand. "Take it," he encouraged her gently. "It's for you." Finally, the girl shook her head. It was a small, firm movement. "I can't take that," she said. Her voice wasn't rude, but it was surprisingly serious. Keanu blinked, slightly confused. He lowered his hand just a fraction. "Why not?" "You earned it. The lemonade is delicious." "Because," she explained as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, "my lemonade costs 50 cents. You gave me way too much." Keanu chuckled softly. He thought she was just being polite. Maybe her parents had taught her not to be greedy, or maybe she felt bad taking all his money. He tried to push the bill closer to her again. "I know it's a lot of change, but I want you to have it. Think of it as a tip for the excellent service." He waited for her to give in. Most people would have. Most adults would have snatched the bill out of his hand without a second thought. But this girl wasn't most people. She didn't move her hands from her lap. She looked at the $20 like it was a problem that needed to be solved, not a gift that needed to be opened. "No," she said again, shaking her head more firmly this time. "I don't want a tip. I just want to sell lemonade. 50 cents. Keanu stood there, frozen for a second. He was used to people wanting things from him. He was used to a world where more was always better. A bigger movie, a bigger explosion, a bigger paycheck. But here, on a quiet driveway in Malibu, he was being told that less was better. This girl valued her product at 50 cents, and no amount of Hollywood money could change her mind. It was a level of integrity and stubbornness that he rarely saw. He looked at her, really looked at her, trying to figure her out. She was so small on that big chair, yet she seemed as solid as a rock. She wasn't impressed by the money. She wasn't impressed by him. She was just a kid with a set of rules, and she wasn't going to break them for anyone. "Okay," Keanu said slowly, pulling his hand back. He put the 20 back into his pocket and felt around in the other pocket. He found a $1 bill. "How about this? Just $1. $1 for the lemonade." The girl looked at the dollar bill. She did some quick mental math. $1 was 2 cups. He had only had 1 sip. She shook her head again. "That's still too much," she said. "You only bought 1 cup." Keanu laughed now, a short surprise sound. He couldn't believe this. He was literally trying to give her money, and she was refusing him. It was completely backwards. He felt a strange mix of frustration and immense respect. He reached into his front pocket and pulled out 2 quarters. He held them in his palm, letting the metal shine in the sunlight. 50 cents, he said. Exact change. The girl's face finally changed. She smiled, breaking the serious tension. "Perfect," she said. She reached out her small hand, and Keanu dropped the 2 coins into her palm. She closed her fingers around them tight like they were gold nuggets. She immediately leaned over and dropped them into a metal tin can that sat on the ground next to her chair. The coins made a satisfying clink-clank sound as they hit the bottom. "Thank you, sir," she said, sounding completely satisfied. "You're welcome," Keanu replied. He took another sip of the lemonade, looking at her over the rim of the cup. He was fascinated. He had just met someone who had more integrity than most businessmen he knew. She had stuck to her price. Even when tempted with 40 times the amount, he stood there for a moment longer, enjoying the interaction. He felt a lightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the lemonade. It was refreshing to meet someone so real, so uncorrupted by the world. He started to turn away, thinking that was the end of it. He thought he would just finish his drink and walk on, heading back to his quiet life. He took a few steps, the gravel crunching under his boots, but then he stopped. He looked back over his shoulder. The girl was watching him go. She wasn't counting her money. She wasn't checking her phone. She was just watching him, her head tilted slightly to the side. She had a thoughtful look on her face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Keanu felt a pull to stay. He felt like there was something more here, something he wasn't seeing yet. He turned back around to face her, curiosity getting the better of him. "You know," he said, taking a step back toward the table, "most people would have taken the 20. The girl shrugged. "Maybe, but I'm not most people." "No," Keanu agreed, smiling at her. "You certainly aren't." He looked down the empty street, then back at her. The sun was starting to dip lower, casting long shadows across the driveway. The air was getting a little cooler. It was that time of day where the world starts to slow down, but for Keanu, his interest was just peaking. He couldn't walk away yet. He wanted to know what made this girl tick. He wanted to know why, in a world that always wants more, she was content with exactly what she asked for. He took another sip of the lemonade, draining the last drop. He crushed the cup slightly in his hand and looked around for a trash can. "You can just put it here," the girl said, pointing to a small bag hanging off the side of the table. "I recycle." Keanu dropped the cup into the bag. "Of course you do," he muttered to himself with a smile. He leaned against the wooden fence that ran along the driveway, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked at the girl, who was now wiping down the table with a rag, making sure everything was tidy for the next customer, if there ever was one. "So," Keanu said, his tone casual like he was talking to an old friend, "why are you doing this?" "The lemonade stand?" The girl stopped wiping and looked at him. She paused for a long time, thinking about her answer. She wasn't going to give him a quick, easy answer. She looked up at the sky, then at her shoes, and finally she locked eyes with him. Her gaze was intense. It was a look that seemed to see right through the actor, right through the celebrity, and straight to the person underneath. "It's not about the money," she said softly. "I don't really care about the money." Keanu frowned slightly. "If it's not about the money, then why sit out here all day?" The girl took a deep breath. She looked a little sad, but also determined. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She held it tightly in her hand. "Because," she said, "sometimes you have to sell the lemonade to find the person who needs to drink it." Keanu stood frozen again. Her words hung in the air, confusing and deep. He didn't understand what she meant. He looked at the paper in her hand, then back at her face. He felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. This little girl was talking in riddles, and for some reason, he felt like his entire life was leading up to hearing whatever she was about to say. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice. The air between them seemed to stand still. It was one of those strange moments where the wind stops blowing. The background noise of the city fades away, and it feels like you are the only two people on Earth. Keanu stared at the young girl, his brow furrowed in confusion. He was used to reading scripts full of dialogue, but this was different. This wasn't a movie script where he could predict the next line. This was real life, and this child was speaking in a way that felt much older than her years. He shifted his weight, leaning one shoulder against the rough wooden fence that lined the driveway. He crossed his arms over his chest, trying to look casual, but his mind was racing. What did she mean by that? "You know who needs to drink it." It sounded like a riddle. He looked down at her, expecting her to laugh or say she was joking, but her face remained serious. Her eyes were wide and honest, locked onto his with an intensity that made him feel like she was looking right through his skin. "I don't think I understand," Keanu said softly. He kept his voice low, matching the quiet tone she had used. He didn't want to scare her off. He felt a strange pull, like he was standing on the edge of a cliff and needed to know what was at the bottom. "You're selling lemonade. Usually, people sell drinks because they want to save up for something. A bike? A new video game?" The girl shook her head slowly. She let go of the folded piece of paper she had been holding and let it drop onto her lap. "I have a bike," she said simply. "And I don't really like video games that much?" Keanu smiled, a small, crooked smile. "Okay, well that makes you even more unique than I thought." He paused, looking out at the empty street before turning back to her. "So if it's not for the money and it's not for the toys, Why are you sitting out here in the hot sun all alone? It's a lot of work for a kid. The girl sighed. It was a heavy sigh for someone so small. She swung her legs back and forth under the chair, the heels of her sneakers knocking against the metal legs with a soft thud, thud, thud. She looked down at her hands for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When she looked up, her expression had changed. The serious business look was gone, replaced by something softer, maybe even a little sad. Because grown-ups are always rushing, she said. They drive by in their cars or they walk looking at their phones. They are always going somewhere else. They are never just here. Keanu listened. He uncrossed his arms and let them hang by his sides. He knew exactly what she meant. He spent his life rushing from one place to another. He was always running to catch a flight, running to a set, running to a meeting. Even when he was walking for fun, his mind was usually rushing ahead to the next thing. He had forgotten what it was like to just stand still and be present. And, the girl continued, sometimes people are sad. They walk past with their heads down and they look like they are carrying a big heavy backpack, even if they aren't wearing one. Keanu felt a lump form in his throat. He swallowed hard. He knew that feeling too. He knew it better than most people. He had lost people he loved. He had faced tragedies that changed him forever. He carried a heaviness in his heart that had been there for years, a quiet sadness that he tried to hide behind smiles and kind gestures. He was a master at hiding his pain, but looking at this girl, he felt like his invisible shield was cracking. She looked at him with a tilt of her head. My dad says that when you see someone who looks heavy like that, you should try to help them. You can't fix their problems, maybe, but you can give them a moment. You can give them a cold drink and a smile. Keanu was stunned. He looked at the small plastic pitcher and the stack of cups. Suddenly, this wasn't just a lemonade stand anymore. It wasn't a game. It was a mission. This little girl wasn't trying to make money. She was trying to heal people, 50 cents at a time. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. That is, Keanu started, but his voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again. That is incredibly wise. Your dad is a smart man. The girl's face dimmed a little. The smile faded from her lips. She looked down at the folded paper on her lap again, her fingers tracing the edges. He was, she said quietly. The two words hit Keanu like a physical blow. He was the past tense. He didn't need to ask what happened. He saw the flash of pain in her eyes, a shadow that crossed her face much too old for a child. She knew about loss. She knew about that heavy backpack. She wasn't just speaking about things she had heard. She was speaking from experience. Keanu didn't say, "I'm sorry." He knew how empty those words could feel when you were grieving. He just stood there, sharing the silence with her. He gave her a slow, respectful nod. He let her know that he understood without her having to say another word. In that second, a bond formed between them. Two souls who had seen the dark side of life, standing in the sunlight together. After a long moment, the girl took a deep breath and seemed to shake the sadness away. She looked back up at him, her expression determined again. So, that's why I wouldn't take the $20, she said, getting back to the topic that had started it all. You can't buy help with money. You can't buy a real smile. Keanu looked at her, his eyes wide. He felt exposed. He realized that when he had offered the $20, he was doing exactly what she was talking about. He was trying to use money to fix a situation. He was trying to buy her happiness. But she was teaching him that you can't fix everything with cash. Some things require time. Some things require heart. You saw me, she continued softly. You didn't just see a kid selling lemonade. You stopped. You were nice. You took the time. She pushed herself off the chair and stood up. She was still very short compared to him, but she stood tall, planting her feet firmly on the ground. She walked around the side of the table and stood right in front of him. There was no table between them now. Just the actor, leaning against the fence, and the girl, looking up at him with eyes that seemed to hold too much knowledge for her age. And I saw you too, she said. Keanu felt his heart hammer against his ribs. This was it. The moment she had been leading up to. He had a feeling she wasn't talking about seeing a movie star. She was talking about seeing the person inside. She was talking about the heavy backpack he had been carrying for so long. "You saw me?" he whispered. "What do you see?" The girl didn't answer right away. She reached into her pocket again and pulled out the folded piece of paper. She held it out to him. Her hand was small, but her grip was steady. "I see someone who needs this more than he needs a 50-cent cup of lemonade," she said. Keanu looked down at the paper. It was a simple white sheet, folded into a small square. He hesitated. He was scared to take it. He felt like if he took it, something would change. He had been comfortable in his quiet sadness. He had learned to live with it. But this girl, this stranger on a street corner, was threatening to break down the walls he had built around his heart. "What is it?" he asked. "It's for you," she insisted, pushing the paper toward his chest. "I wrote it a long time ago. I was waiting for the right person to give it to. My mom told me to trust my gut. And my gut says, it's you." Keanu slowly reached out and took the paper. His fingers brushed against hers for a split second. Her hand was warm, alive with energy. The paper felt thin and fragile in his hand. He didn't open it yet. He just held it, looking at the girl. He felt a mix of fear and curiosity. What could a 9-year-old possibly have written that would matter to him? "Why me?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. "There are millions of people in the world. Why give it to me?" The girl shrugged, a simple, small gesture. "Because you stopped," she said again. "Because you tried to give me more than I asked for, but you took the no without getting mad. You're kind, but you're also tired." She pointed a finger gently at his chest, right where his heart was. "You're really, really tired of carrying that backpack." Keanu felt a tear prick the corner of his eye. He quickly blinked it away. He couldn't remember the last time someone had seen him so clearly. He spent his life pretending to be other people, tough guys, heroes, action stars. He wore costumes and makeup. But this girl saw through the costumes. She saw the exhaustion in his soul. She saw the man who just wanted to rest. "I am," he admitted. It was the first time he had said it out loud in a long time. "I am very tired." The girl smiled. It was a soft, comforting smile, like a warm blanket. "Then I did my job right," she said. She turned and walked back behind her table, sitting back down on her chair. The business transaction was over, but she felt the real work was done. "Open it," she said, nodding at his hand. "It's not much, just some words. But sometimes words are the only things that help." Keanu stood up straight, pushing off the fence. He held the folded paper between his thumb and forefinger. The sun had dipped lower now, casting long, golden shadows across the driveway. The street was still quiet. It was just the two of them, suspended in this moment of honesty. He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling slowly. He looked at the paper, then at the girl who was watching him with expectant eyes. He felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. For years he had been running from his pain or trying to hide it. But today, on a whim, he had stopped for lemonade. And because he stopped, he was about to receive a gift that no amount of money could ever buy. He slowly began to unfold the paper. The crackle of the paper seemed loud in. The paper was smooth and crisp between his fingers, the kind of paper you take out of a fresh printer pack, but the edges were slightly soft from being carried around in a pocket. Keanu held it carefully as if it were made of glass. The sun was dipping lower now, casting a golden hue over the street, making the blue ink on the paper shimmer. The world felt incredibly quiet. The distant sound of traffic seemed to vanish, and the only thing Keanu could hear was the steady thumping of his own heart. He looked down at the page. The handwriting was messy and loopy, written with the careful effort of a child trying to make sure every letter was perfect. There were no scribbles or doodles, just words, written in lines that sloped slightly downward toward the right side of the page. He took a deep breath. Inhaling the scent of the cooling evening air mixed with the faint smell of the lemons sitting on the table. He didn't know what he expected to see. Maybe a joke? Maybe a quote from a movie she liked? But as his eyes focused on the first line, he realized this was something else entirely. It wasn't a letter addressed to whom it may concern. There was no "Dear Stranger." It was just a list. A simple, short list of thoughts that hit Keanu harder than any punch he had ever taken in a fight scene. The first line read, "Sadness is heavy, but you don't have to carry it alone." Keanu felt his breath hitch in his throat. He swallowed, his eyes instantly stinging. He hadn't cried in a long time. He had learned to build a wall around his feelings, to keep the pain locked away so he could keep working, keep moving, keep living. But those 7 words were like a key unlocking a door he had welded shut years ago. He looked at the girl. She was watching him, her chin resting in her hands, her elbows on the table. She didn't look away. She didn't look embarrassed. She just watched him with a calm, steady gaze, waiting for him to process the words. She looked like a tiny, wise old soul who knew exactly what she was doing. He looked back down at the paper and read the second line, "It is okay to not be okay. The sun comes back even after the darkest night." Keanu gripped the paper tighter. It was such a simple thought, something you might read on a poster in a classroom. But coming from her, in this moment, it felt profound. He had lived through some very dark nights. He had spent years feeling like the sun might never really shine properly again. He had smiled for cameras and signed autographs, but inside he felt gray and cold. But here she was, telling him that the light always returns. It wasn't just advice. It felt like a promise. The third line made him pause the longest. It was written in slightly smaller letters, as if she had run out of room or was hesitating as she wrote it. "You are enough just because you are here. You don't have to do anything to be worthy." Keanu let out a long, shaky breath. For his entire adult life, his worth had been measured by box office numbers, by ticket sales, by how loud the audience cheered. He felt pressure to always be on, to always be the nice guy, the action hero, the philanthropist. He felt like he had to constantly earn his place on this earth through doing good things or making successful movies. But this little girl was telling him that none of that mattered. Just by standing there, breathing, being alive, he was enough. It was a concept so foreign to him that it almost felt alien, yet it resonated deep in his bones. He stood there for a long time, staring at the blue ink. The paper trembled slightly in his hand, not from the wind, but from the emotion coursing through him. He felt stripped bare. He felt like she had reached into his chest and taken out all the heavy stones he was carrying. Leaving him feeling light and dizzy, he refolded the paper slowly, pressing the creases flat with his thumb. He didn't put it in his pocket. He held it tight in his hand like he was holding onto a lifeline. He looked at the girl, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to put on his movie star face. He didn't smile politely. He didn't try to hide the redness around his eyes. He just let himself be seen. I don't know what to say," Keanu whispered. His voice was rough, thick with unshed tears. "Thank you seems like it's not enough." The girl smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "You just have to take it." Keanu nodded. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "How did you know?" he asked. "How did you know I needed to read this?" The girl shrugged again, a simple, effortless movement. "I told you," she said. "I saw your backpack. It looked heavy." Keanu looked down at his own shoulders, visualizing the invisible weight he had been lugging around for years. Loss, grief, loneliness, it had all accumulated over time until it felt normal. He had forgotten what it felt like to walk without it. "It was," he admitted. "It was very heavy." The girl hopped off her chair again. She walked around the table and stood in front of him. She looked up, not with pity, but with empathy. She reached out a small hand and gently touched his arm. It was a brief, fleeting touch, but it grounded him. It connected them. "Maybe you can put it down for a while," she suggested softly. "At least until you finish your walk." Keanu looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the kindness in her eyes, the purity of her heart. She wasn't doing this for attention. She wasn't doing it because she knew who he was. She was doing it because she cared. In a world full of noise and greed, she was a beacon of light. I think I will, Keanu said. I think I will leave it right here. Good, the girl said firmly. She pointed a finger at him. And remember, you can always come back for more lemonade if you get thirsty again. But next time, bring the exact change. I'm serious about the 50 cents. Keanu let out a laugh, a real, genuine laugh that bubbled up from his chest. It was a sound that surprised him. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and shook his head. I promise, he said. I will bring the exact change. He stepped back, putting a little distance between them. He felt different. The air seemed fresher. The colors of the street seemed brighter. It was like a gray filter had been lifted off the world. He still had his problems. He still had his past. But they didn't feel like they were crushing him anymore. He felt okay, and for him, that was a huge thing. You are an amazing person, Keanu said. Never change. You either, the girl replied. Keanu turned to leave. He took a few steps, then stopped. He turned back around one last time. The girl was already back on her chair, rearranging the cups on the table. She looked like she was ready for the next customer. She was back to business, but the air around her seemed to glow. He held up the hand holding the folded note. I'm going to keep this, he said. It's yours, she said without looking up. Keanu turned and started walking down the street. He walked slowly at first, savoring the feeling of the evening breeze on his face. He slipped the note into his front pocket, close to his heart, patting it gently to make sure it was safe. He didn't put on his sunglasses. He didn't pull his hood up. He just walked as himself. As he moved further away, the sounds of the city started to come back. The hum of an engine, a dog barking in the distance, the rustle of leaves in the wind. But the silence of the moment stayed with him. He realized that he had been looking for peace in all the wrong places. He thought he needed to escape to a mountaintop or a private island to find quiet. But he found it right here, on a sidewalk, next to a cardboard box and a pitcher of lemonade. He thought about the words on the paper. You are enough. He repeated them in his head like a mantra. With every step he took, he felt a little lighter. The heavy backpack was still there, but the straps had loosened. He didn't have to carry it all the time. He could put it down. He passed a street lamp flickering on as the sky turned a deep shade of purple. He saw a couple walking a dog, laughing together. He saw a taxi driving by with its lights on. The world was moving, living, breathing. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was truly part of it. Not just watching it from behind a window, he reached the end of the block and paused at the intersection. The light was red, holding him back. He looked back down the street toward the small driveway. He couldn't see the table anymore from here, but he knew she was there. He knew she was sitting on her chair, waiting for the next person who needed a drink and a little bit of hope. The light turned green. The little walking figure lit up on the post across the street. Keanu took a deep breath and stepped off the curb. He didn't know where he was going to go for dinner, and he didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of it. He felt a sense of hope, fragile but real. Burning in his chest, he walked into the crossing, surrounded by the evening rush of people. He was just one person in a crowd of millions. But he didn't feel lonely. He had a note in his pocket and a memory in his heart. And as he disappeared into the flow of the city, the sun finally dipped below the horizon, making way for the stars, just like the girl said it would. The day was over, but something new was just beginning. Keanu walked for a long time. His legs moved automatically, carrying him through the busy streets of the city, but his mind was still back at that quiet driveway. The noise of the traffic, the honking horns, the roar of buses, the music thumping from passing cars seemed very far away. It was like he was underwater, moving in a slow, peaceful world of his own. His hand kept going to his pocket, his fingers brushing against the folded paper to make sure it was still there. It was a small thing, a single piece of paper, but it felt heavy with meaning. It felt like a shield. Eventually he found himself sitting on a bench in a small park. The sun had completely set now, and the street lamps had flickered on, casting pools of yellow light on the concrete path. In front of him, a fountain bubbled quietly, the water catching the light as it splashed down. It was a peaceful spot, a place where people usually stopped to tie their shoes or check their phones. Keanu sat there, just watching the water. He wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. He didn't have a script to read or a meeting to run to. He was just existing. For a man who was always rushing, always chasing the next scene, sitting still felt strange. But it wasn't a bad strange. It felt like waking up from a long, deep sleep and realizing that the sun is shining. He thought about the girl. He thought about her eyes, old, wise eyes that had seen too much but still held a spark of light. He thought about her refusing the $20. It was such a small act, sticking to a price, but it had shaken him deeply. He realized that he had gotten used to a world where everything was for sale. In his world, problems were fixed with checks and donations. People expected things from him because of who he was. But she didn't want anything from him. She didn't care about his money. She cared about his heart. He pulled the note out of his pocket again. The street lamp was right above him, illuminating the blue ink. He read the words one more time, letting them sink deep into his bones. Sadness is heavy, but you don't have to carry it alone. Tears finally spilled over his cheeks. He didn't try to wipe them away. He didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. He just let them fall. They were hot and fast, washing away layers of dust and grit that had been covering his soul for years. He cried for the people he had lost. He cried for the loneliness he had endured in crowded rooms. He cried for the little boy he used to be and the man he had become, and as he cried, he felt the weight on his shoulders getting lighter. It wasn't gone. Sadness doesn't just disappear forever, but it wasn't crushing him anymore. It was just there, a part of him, like a scar that reminds you of a wound that has healed. He realized that he had been trying to be strong for so long that he had forgotten how to be human. He had forgotten that it was okay to break, that it was okay to need help. A few minutes passed. He took a deep, shuddering breath and wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt. He felt raw, like an open nerve, but he also felt clean. He looked up at the sky. The city lights were too bright to see many stars, but he could see the moon, a thin crescent hanging high above the buildings. It looked peaceful. He folded the note carefully and put it back in his wallet, in the compartment where he kept his most important things. He knew he would keep it forever. It wasn't just a note from a fan. It was a lifeline thrown to him by a stranger. It was a reminder that kindness exists in the most unexpected places. Keanu stood up from the bench. His legs felt a little stiff, but his spirit felt light. He started walking again, but this time he wasn't walking to escape. He was walking to go home. As he walked out of the park, he noticed things he hadn't noticed before. He saw a man playing a guitar on the corner, the melody drifting through the air. He saw a couple sharing a laugh over a slice of pizza. He saw a dog wagging its tail so hard its whole body shook. The world was the same as it had been an hour ago. The problems were still there. The traffic was still loud. But Keanu was different. He was seeing the world through new eyes. He wasn't looking at the ground anymore. He was looking up. He was seeing the beauty in the ordinary. He passed a coffee shop. The lights were warm inside, and he could smell the rich aroma of brewing beans. Through the window, he saw a barista handing a cup to a customer, and they shared a smile. It was a tiny moment, meaningless to most people, but Keanu smiled too. He understood now that life wasn't made of the big, blockbuster moments. It wasn't the red carpets or the premiere nights. Life was made of these small moments. A cup of coffee, a shared smile, a 50-cent cup of lemonade. He thought about what the girl had said. You are enough just because you are here. He repeated it to himself, testing the words in his mind. They felt true. He didn't need to be a movie star to be worthy of love. He didn't need to be rich to be a good person. He just had to be Keanu, the guy who liked motorcycles, the guy who was a little quiet, the guy who tried his best. As he walked down the sidewalk, a young guy coming the other way did a double take. His eyes went wide and he stopped. Hey, the guy said, sounding nervous. Are you him? Keanu stopped. Usually in the past he might have felt a twitch of annoyance. He might have pulled his hat down and kept walking, guarding his privacy. He might have put on a fake smile and rushed past. But tonight, he didn't feel any of that. He felt calm. He looked at the young man. He saw the excitement in his eyes, the hope. He didn't see a fan asking for something. He saw a human being who wanted to connect. Keanu smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "Yeah," he said softly. "It's me." The young man beamed. "I love your movies, man. Seriously, they helped me through a really tough time." Keanu felt a warmth spread through his chest. He thought about the note in his wallet. He thought about the lemonade stand. The circle was already closing. The girl had helped him, and now, hearing this, he realized that his work had helped this stranger. It was a chain of kindness stretching out into the dark, linking people together. "Thank you for telling me that," Keanu said. He meant it. "That really means a lot to me. Can I get a selfie?" the guy asked, holding up his phone. "Sure," Keanu said. He didn't rush. He stood close to the guy, put an arm around his shoulder, and looked at the camera. He didn't put on his action face. He just looked like a regular guy standing on a street corner, happy to be there. Click. "Thanks, man. Have a good night," the young guy said, jogging away, looking down at his phone like he had just won the lottery. Keanu watched him go. He stood there for a moment, the night air cool on his face. He realized that he wasn't hiding anymore. He didn't want to hide. He wanted to be present, just like the girl had taught him. He wanted to be here, in the moment, even if the moment was just a selfie with a stranger on a Tuesday night. He continued walking. The city skyline rose up in front of him, tall buildings glowing with lights. It was a beautiful sight, a testament to human ambition and energy. But Keanu knew that the real beauty wasn't in the buildings or the lights. It was in the people. It was in the little girl with the big heart who sold lemonade not for profit but for connection. He reached his building. The doorman held the door open for him with a nod. "Good evening, sir." "Good evening," Keanu replied. "It's a beautiful night." He stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for his floor. As the doors closed, shutting out the noise of the city, he leaned back against the wall. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He saw the girl's face in his mind one last time. He saw the serious way she looked at him, the way she refused his money, the way she handed him the note. He whispered into the silence of the elevator, "Thank you." He wasn't just thanking her. He was thanking the universe for putting him in that place at that exact time. If he had walked a different way or left his house 5 minutes later, he would have missed it. It was a miracle of timing. And it reminded him that life is full of these miracles if you just slow down enough to see them. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. He walked down the hall to his door. He unlocked it and stepped inside. The apartment was quiet, still, and empty. But for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. He hung up his jacket. He took off his boots. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city below. Millions of lights, millions of stories. Somewhere out there, a little girl was probably packing up her lemonade stand, counting her coins, maybe thinking about the strange man she met that day. Keanu smiled. He touched his pocket where the note was safe. He felt a sense of gratitude that washed over him like a warm wave. The world was still complicated. He still had hard days ahead of him. But he knew now that he didn't have to carry it all alone. He turned away from the window and walked into his kitchen. He opened the fridge and took out a bottle of water. As he took a drink, he thought about tomorrow. Maybe he would go for a ride on his motorcycle. Maybe he would read a new script. Or maybe, just maybe, he would go for another walk and see what the world had to show him. He stood in the middle of his living room, the simple, honest truth of the day settling into his heart. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the fame. It was about the connection. It was about the fact that, in a world of billions, a simple act of kindness could stop a man in his tracks and change everything. And as he stood there, finally at peace, Keanu Reeves knew that he was going to be okay. The night was dark, but he wasn't afraid of.